Join us for a special episode of the Amor al Migrante podcast, featuring our Executive Director, Melissa Lopez, and the Bishop of El Paso and Board Director, Mark Seitz, as we celebrate 40 years of Estrella del Paso and the journey that brought us here.
This country is unique in all the world because it became a country of immigrants.
Yes. Immigration has become a political issue, kind of going back to what you were saying earlier, is that for a long time, and you think about it, President Reagan was a Republican president.
Forgotten the meaning behind the Statue of Liberty, and I think we have forgotten the meaning of immigration and the meaning of a human life.
How can you do this work and be in this place where you are dedicating yourself to helping this particular population of people? Welcome, everyone, to the very first Amor al Migrante episode of 2026.
Yes.
We're back for a new year. This is a special year for us. We are celebrating 40 years in the El Paso community in 2026, so we're excited about that. We're going to dedicate a few episodes this year specifically to the anniversary, which is kind of why we're starting off with this one. We have some very special guests that you may notice here. Nobody panic. Nobody get nervous. Our big two bosses aren't sitting right next to us.
It's not that my leg is shaking under the desk like crazy.
Bishop Mark Seitz, of course, thank you so much for joining us from the Catholic Diocese of El Paso. For those of you that may not know, Estrella del Paso is a ministry of the Catholic Diocese of El Paso, so we are very closely connected to them. Bishop Seitz serves as our board chair, so he's very much in service to our organization. Bishop, you also serve on the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops.
Committee on Migration.
Committee on Migration. Yeah, so very enmeshed in this issue. So it's a good it's a good topic to have you here today.
Absolutely. And also we're joined by your Executive Director, Melissa Lopez. Ms. Melissa, welcome to our episode of Amor al Migrante.
It's hard to believe this is your first episode.
It is. I know. I didn't even realize you all wanted me. I thought it was just the big star.
So welcome to the episode of the podcast of the organization that you direct. For the first time. Right. And today we're going to be talking about how this organization started 40 years ago, before Diocese and Migrant and Refugee Services, what is now Estrella del Paso. And we're going to go ahead and take a look back at the past 40 years for this organization. So I guess we can go ahead and get started with the questions and the podcast itself. So Bishop Seitz, let's start with you. So can you first talk about the time of the Catholic Church connection to this cause, to immigration historically? Like how the church connected to Diocesan Migrant and Refugee Services? What was the thought process to go ahead and create and kind of have this organization serve our community from the 40 years that we've been here?
Sure. First of all, it's a pleasure to be with you all and to and really to celebrate the great work that's been done by what is now known as Estrella del Paso, here in El Paso. And I think one thing celebrating 40 years brings home to us is that contrary to what many people may think, the church didn't just now get interested in migration. It's been something that's been a huge concern of ours from the very beginning. In fact, the bishops of the United States first organized after World War I, or it might have even been during World War I, to deal with people who were left homeless in the midst of the war. And not only that, but the church began celebrating World Refugee Day more than 100 years ago.
Wow.
And has been marking that day with a message from the Holy Father ever since its beginning.
Right.
So this is not new for us. And in fact, the connection with church, I often like to say it has to do with Gospel 101.
Taking notes.
Yeah. It's not something the church invented, to meet a political moment, but rather it's the other way around. Long before it was made a political issue, it was an issue in terms of the discipleship, our following of Jesus Christ, who had such a concern for the vulnerable, for the weak, for those who had no place in this world. He called them and told them that they count, they matter to him. And, we have so many accounts where Jesus took examples of foreigners to show their virtue, virtue to those who expected to be the ones that were put high on a pedestal in the midst of that community. And of course, the Good Samaritan being one of the chief, for our purposes right here, that Samaritan was considered a foreigner that the people of Israel didn't even want to talk to. Now he's the one that stops, whereas the priest and the Levi passed by the man who was waylaid on the side of the road. There's just so many angles from which you can consider that story. But it's clear that Jesus was pointing out that those people that we consider others can very often be the ones that show us the way we're called to live.
Absolutely.
I don't know if many people also are aware that Jesus traveled outside his country. First of all, as a refugee, when he escaped the effort of Herod to kill this newborn child when he went with his parents to Egypt. But also later Jesus crossed out of Israel to the area of Tyre and Sidon, which is now present-day Lebanon.
Right.
And there he played the part of a Jew that didn't even want to deal with this widow woman who was begging him to cure her daughter.
Right.
But then with her humble act of faith, Jesus said, because of your faith, your child is now cured,
Yeah, absolutely.
So there's so many examples I could give. Right now, but don't get me started.
Think you might be a good person to.
Just a few examples.
Right.
So we take that historical perspective, this biblical perspective, and we fast forward to 1986. And so this is where, Melissa, can you talk to us a little bit about the origination of this organization and the need that it was created to serve in that time?
Sure. So back in 1986, Father Matty was very involved in starting the organization through the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. I always get the acronym confused. I always want to say Catholic Conference of Bishops, and it's the
correct.
Conference.
No, that's correct.
Catholic Conference of Bishops. See, I always I don't know why I do that, but through the conference, and that's actually where we got our name. So the conference had a department that was called Migration and Refugee Services and still does. And that's where a lot of work is done. The Justice for Immigrants Project, a number of refugee services and other services to immigrants throughout the years. And so that's where we got our first name. And that they added the diocesan to distinguish that it was a local office as opposed to part of the national conference. But Father Matty and a group of others got together and felt that there was a real need for this ministry in El Paso. At the time, we were dealing with registry, amnesty. We had a lot of people that were, coming back and forth, but also having to process through Mexico, to consular process. And so there was a real need for an organization that could do this work. Ironically, DMRS and Las Americas were started almost at the same time, and both with the Catholic social teaching behind the reasoning for opening the organization. In both cases, because the Catholic Church has always been so strong, always had such a strong voice in terms of immigration issues. And so was started here. And our first home was actually right next door to St. Patrick's Cathedral in a building that no longer exists. But we were right next door. At the time, there were fewer than 10 employees.
Wow.
And so we moved into our current location in 2005. At the time, 15 employees. And now today, we're up to 57 employees is where we sit pretty regularly these days. But we were started from that conviction of Father Maddie and the original board of directors that there needed to be a Catholic institution that was providing legal services to people. And especially because El Paso has traditionally been a very low-income community.
Right.
And so having an organization that was really focused on serving that low-income population and trying to, as best as possible, assist people going through the process. So, I have to say my dad was one of the first recipients of beneficiaries of the organization back probably within the first year that the organization was started. And so, it feels very much like it's God's work, both what we do every day, but also in getting me to where I am today, because this organization has long been in the community and been serving.
I mean, the need remains, right? We're seeing 40 years later
day.
that the team continues to grow, the services continue to grow. So the need for an organization like this, the need for the church backing this type of work has been growing.
Absolutely.
And we should probably clarify too, people can go to an immigration lawyer, and there are those lawyers in town and some good ones. And
Yes.
I know. But a lot of people, as you alluded, can't afford it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's why the church needed to step up.
Yep.
Exactly. No,
Yes,
and going back to my family too, my mom and dad became residents about 5-6 years ago too. And they didn't know about Estrella del Paso, so they went through a regular lawyer, and it was around $4,000 per parent. And then my brothers had to get their status too. So like you're looking at around like $10,000-$12,000 that they had to spend exactly where the community has the resources like Estrella del Paso that helps them in that case. And that money can be invested in different situations. Maybe you're coming with no housing, no clothing, no nothing.
Right.
Now you have to pay for a lawyer. Then maybe you get to someone points you to Estrella del Paso, and then that money can be used for now you can get clothing, you can get a place to live, you can get settled in a new country, and you can have a head start from the rest of people. And I think that's important that we need to have more people raise the voice and point out to the right direction, and that goes to Estrella because a lot of community members, they don't know about it. Some community members might not be aware that these resources exist, and that's when we count on the community to kind of pass it along when you see it, when you hear it. As like Mick mentioned, that the community has their resources, and Estrella del Paso is here for them, and it's been here for them in 40 years already.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's not like we're just started doing this. It's something that we've been doing for 40 years, right?
Yeah. And one of the things that I think is important to mention is that we don't do any advertising.
Yeah.
So everybody that comes to us through word of mouth. And that's really incredible when you look at the fact that over 40 years, we have continued to provide tens of thousands of people services every single year. I think it shows the need in the community, that there's a tremendous need, but also just that we do have a good reputation for providing assistance in the community. And, you think about, I remember one family in particular that we had several years ago. It was a gentleman who had 9 children, and all of his children were eligible for citizenship because he was a U.S. citizen. But they first had to apply for residency and then had to apply for citizenship. And at the time, we were on a reduced fee schedule and a free legal services schedule, and he had a job that afforded him, more than what we would do for free. But because he had 9 children, his immigration fees alone were something like $40,000.
Oh my gosh.
Just his immigration fees.
Yeah.
And then we did a very reduced service fee for him, and I think we still ended up charging him like $10,000.
Wow.
It was so much work, but to think about if he had to have gone to a private attorney, $40,000 on top of probably $10,000 per child, you're talking about $150,000 for him to get his children the legal status that that they, by law, really had, just getting the government to recognize it. So it really can be impactful, even for people that have, good jobs. There are a lot of different circumstances that people don't take into account sometimes as to why or an organization like ours is needed.
And that's why it's also important to mention that we have since expanded to providing the free legal services. So before you were talking about this reduced fee schedule, and now it's primarily free services. I think we're like
It's 100%.
Yeah, so
100% free.
So now it's not even. I mean, that obstacle has also been eliminated over time, where we've been able to expand services and what we're able to do for people in this community.
Yes.
No, and it's crazy because, like, going back to what Bishop Seitz mentioned at the beginning, like, this is like immigration has been an issue that's been here forever,
Right?
Right, since the Old Testament, you could see Moses going from place to place, trying to find its place, after him, and all that, and up to 40 years ago, organizations were barely created to head on an issue that has been here for like the entire existence of the human being. So it's just crazy to me to think that, man, like, why we haven't paid that much attention to something that is natural to happen, and it's been happening for like our history, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So in the years that both of you have been doing this, what changes have you noticed in terms on how people view and choose to support this cause? Like, what 40 years, I know it's a long time and it's maybe a lot of changes, but what are the ones that you might come to the top of your head and say, like, like, I went through this, I saw this, I was here when this happened. So what changes have you guys noticed?
That's a big question.
A lot of changes for sure. And we've had our highs and lows throughout our history as a country, for sure. But if you go back 40 years to the 80s, that was kind of a high, wasn't it?
Yes.
Ronald Reagan was president. And at that time, he, as a Republican, was able to push through Congress a new law, an updating of our immigration law. It's been given a bad name since, like amnesty is suddenly a bad word.
Right.
But he gave a process by which people who had been here for many years could now finally come out of the shadows and receive legal status and eventually citizenship, not for free, but there was a pathway, at least.
Yes. And, I think that that's the difference, is that immigration has become a political issue, kind of going back to what you were saying earlier, is that for a long time, and you think about it, President Reagan was a Republican president, and to think that that particular piece of legislation was huge in terms of the number of people that it helped, and the generational effects of those laws. And it was, in fact, a Democratic president in Bill Clinton in 1996 that actually made the law more strict and added a lot of the penalties that we have today that make it sometimes almost impossible for people to obtain their status. And so immigration back in the 80s was not a political issue, was viewed as a humanitarian issue. And I think, again, that's why it was so important for the church to get involved, because it wasn't about politics, it was about people.
Right.
And I think that's when the biggest change that I've seen is the dehumanization of the people involved in the system, and this treating of people as numbers, as statistics,
Right.
And not as the human beings that they are. And so, I've been practicing a little over 18 years, and when I first started practicing, I practiced under George Bush. George W. Bush, not his father, George W. And then Obama, first Trump, Biden, and then now the second Trump administration. And that's been the biggest thing that I've noticed, is just that everything has become political.
Right.
It used to be that you would see changes, but they weren't significant changes from president to president. The government pretty much operated kind of pro forma, and, the wheels turned regardless of who was the president. And now with this administration, we've seen huge shifts in policies, and we're seeing it every day in the news now, and so it's become an issue that everybody knows about or thinks they know about. I should say, because I think the reality is people really don't understand the issue; they just understand the sound bites.
And if I could go back a little bit in terms of the attitude of this country through the years, to paint this broader picture of what we've experienced. As I said, we've had ups and downs, highs and lows through the years, and some of the lows have been really low. I mean, slavery, a major one where we have forced migration to our country against people's will, and then we treat them like trash.
Right.
And now, unfortunately, we have a president that calls people trash, but that's on the side there. But when I was in school, in public school, I learned about immigration to this country, and what I was taught was that this country is unique in all the world because it became a country of immigrants.
Yes.
And while that history lesson said we've had times when we treated people really poorly, we've come to realize now that this has been a tremendous blessing to us, that we've brought people together from all over the world, and we've formed a new people, and we used to call it a melting pot.
Yes.
We've tuned that a bit as we thought about it, because we realized that people shouldn't have to leave behind their culture, their language, their tradition, but everybody can be part of the tapestry now that makes this beautiful country that has become a model for the rest of the world. That's what I was taught.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. No, exactly.
And sad to say, it seems like that lesson has largely been forgotten. People still go and see, when they go to New York, the Statue of Liberty with its beautiful poem underneath it, and bring me your tired, your poor, your downtrodden masses. Now it seems that people just look at it and pass by.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we have forgotten the meaning behind the Statue of Liberty, and I think we have forgotten the meaning of immigration and the meaning of a human life. I think sometimes social media helps in many ways, but also kind of put the wrong messaging, or it's easy to put the wrong messaging that we devalue the life of a human being because you saw someone that posted about it. Yeah. And then if you think some words resonate with you, then you're like, now you're pro this and pro that, without thinking about like behind that comment, it's someone reading it that you're affecting. It goes back to school too, but kids being discriminated, bullying. It's like you're passing that message to the younger generations, and the younger generation is going to pass on that message to the younger generation, right? And I think it becomes a cycle that is going to be hard to break if we get to a point that we don't remember and go back to the roots of like a human life deserves dignity, and not because they were born 20,000 miles away from you means that they're worth less. A human life is going to be a human life forever. Dignity, respect, love has to be the core values of whoever you are, whatever religious background you have, whatever political views you have. And I think we have forgotten that piece. And hopefully, and I pray, that we get back to that track before it's too late for us to recognize that we're like, oh, okay, I was wrong for this.
Yeah. I think back to the movie Coming to America with Eddie Murphy.
I love that movie.
But I think it was so symbolic of that idea that you did want to come to the United States because, you could come to the United States and achieve the American dream, right? We were so good about talking about the American dream and how anybody who worked hard could achieve the dream. And, the premise of the movie is that he's this prince from an African country that comes to the US with nothing and then is able to establish himself. But, that movie today, I'm curious to see how well that would be received today. Because I remember loving that movie back when it came out in the 80s. But today, I think it would be different.
Oh,
yeah.
now you'll be scared to promote that movie because you never know what response is going to be or the backlash you're going to receive to promoting immigration in a sense. Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, Bishop, you've been very vocal about immigration in the Catholic Church during this conversation. You've kind of talked about that a little bit. What would you say to people, to our Catholic population who is might feel uneasy or uncertain about supporting immigrants? I mean, what's the message to them if they're like, I don't know if I can get behind this cause, or I don't know if I can, because we have encountered those, people with that thought process. So what would you say to them?
It's interesting that in Mass today, this first week of Lent, Monday, you know what we read in the Gospel? Matthew 25. And for those of you who that might not ring a bell, that's where Jesus gives the image of the Last Judgment, and he divides the group between the sheep and the goats. Yeah. And he turns to the one and said, come into the kingdom my Father has prepared for you. For I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty and you gave me drink. I was homeless and you welcomed me. And he goes, the list. And so you asked me what I would say. I would say, read it. Read
Absolutely,
it.
Absolutely.
It's, if you possibly can, remove yourself for a moment from political categories and consider the category of a disciple of Jesus Christ. And I'm not saying that in immigration every question is completely resolved by that. No. And by the way, the church says countries legitimately have borders, legitimately have authority over those borders. And, that we can distinguish who should enter and who shouldn't. All these questions the church addresses. But if you don't start with Matthew 25, then you're going to be off track all the rest of the way.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so true. That's so true. And goes back to the reason why Jesus, like the disciples, were like so different. We had people who were tax preparers. We had people people who were like fishermen. Like it was so I guess how can I say it?
Diverse.
Diverse, exactly. Well, diverse. To leave us that behind, that you it doesn't matter how you live, it doesn't matter who you are, what you do. We all belong in the realm of I guess in the kingdom of God, right? And that's something that has to be in the top of our minds before we, I guess, say something against someone or judge someone, because that was the reason behind it. And I think the Bible says it from the very beginning to the very end, is to treat everyone equally, because with that you'll be judged when you get to the kingdom of God. And it's something that we can't forget for now.
Yeah. So intense.
And then
good advice.
Right. Sorry, it got a little darker in that sense. But to end it in a positive note, what would both of you say has been the best part of being involved in this type of work, specifically in immigration and also with Estrella del Paso, or the MRS people?
For me, it's knowing that what we do matters.
Yeah.
And that the work that we do, even on the days when it's hard and we're stressed out and we're, not sleeping, letting all of those, those thoughts creep into our minds, it's that what we do matters.
Yeah.
And that it has an impact, not just on people today, but it'll have an impact for generations. And I feel that personally because I'm a product of Estrella del Paso and DMRS in terms of, who knows what my life would have been had my dad not and my mom not found DMRS back in the day and benefited from it. And I think for me, one of the things that kind of keeps me definitely Matthew 25, but also Corinthians, faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. I'm obviously condensing the Bible verse significantly.
You did it well.
But
Approved.
but I think, just trying to do everything that I do from a place of love and trying to encounter other people from that lens of love, even the people that I disagree with, and trying to treat them as the way that I would want to be treated, and what I'm constantly preaching, in that we're dealing with people and not robots or anything like that. But for me, it's the love, there's so much love in the community, and to get to see, I've had the privilege of seeing people that I helped 15 years ago come back and tell me about, how their lives have been impacted. And that's something that you can't replicate. That's something that you can't get rid of. Unfortunately, a good friend of ours, Carlos Spector, has been diagnosed with terminal cancer, and he's in hospice care. I got to visit him last week, and he really, for a long time, for 40 years, has been doing this work. And one of the questions that we asked him was, what do we need to do? What do we take forward? And he said, keep fighting and don't give up. And I think that's the biggest thing, is keep fighting and don't give up, because he said, things aren't going to get better. You just have to assume that they're going to continue to get worse, but that doesn't mean that you lose your fight. And so I think I'm really lucky in so many ways to have so many people, Bishop Seitz, who I see throughout the country and throughout the world, frankly, standing up for the people that I love and the people that we serve, and knowing that, the Holy Father cares about the same people that we do, and knowing that we're not alone in this fight, is certainly what keeps me going and motivates me to continue to do it, even on those difficult days. Yeah, because there are a lot of those lately.
Absolutely.
And for you, Bishop Seitz?
Yeah. Well, I can't say that I came by Estrella the same way you did, but I got here as quickly as I could.
Yes.
That's what matters.
And the truth is, it's been so rewarding for me. People come up sometimes and they say, "Oh, I pray for you because I know how hard this must be," sort of thing, this work. And certainly there are a lot of folks out there online and stuff that aren't too kind. But, my overwhelming sense is how rewarding this is, and how much I've learned from immigrants.
Yeah,
They are the source of wisdom in the midst of this world, and the wisdom in terms of a way of faith. They inspire me so much and have taught me so much that I feel just blessed to have found myself in a place where I could speak for them.
Absolutely.
That's amazing.
It's amazing.
I can't imagine life without Estrella del Paso. It's just hard for me to imagine, because as an attorney, there's lots of different ways to do this work, right? But I've tried to see what
would look like.
Yeah, but it's just not. It's not within my realm of possibility.
Yeah,
to think beyond the organization, and because we are so blessed. I mean, gosh, to get to do this work every single day is incredible.
And the truth is, Estrella was one of the first organizations that was doing this work on behalf of the church.
Wow.
And so we have been a model for so many in the rest of the country
That's awesome.
who who are carrying this out today in some measure because we've helped them to see the way. I think we might still be one of the very largest organizations to do this work. And we're doing it day after day, as you alluded earlier, in one of the most financially, economically limited parts of the country. Yes. We're pulling this off, and it's pretty wonderful. It's a work of God ultimately.
Absolutely.
Talk about feeling prouder of being Estrella del Paso, right? And it's crazy. And for me, like every time I get to hear the success stories that we have, but not only that, but also the smiles of our team, because of course, like social media allows me to put success stories that we hear from our staff. But are there so many others that we don't put publicly on social media that we hear and hearing the real joy of our staff is like priceless. Because like you could there's people that do this work, of course, because they need a paycheck, right? But you could tell that the staff of Estrella del Paso does it not only for a paycheck, they do it because they love it, and that's transmitted in the hours that they put in, like how late they leave, how early they get, how much they drive, all the presentations, the time, the effort, the sweat they put into it. It just makes me feel like prouder every single day to walk into the office, because I know I'm walking into a place that is not only here just to exist, but it's here to make a difference and help those that need the help, and it's just like crazy to me, and it's just so rewarding to know that I'm part of this Estrella family.
Amen.
Yeah, I think so too. I think meeting the first people who start when people come in to say thank you, I think it's hard to express that through a video or through emails or through photos, because there's so much emotion behind it when people are truly grateful and they say things like, God bless you, thank you so much, like all of these things, and you're just like, you did the work for it. Like that journey was really difficult. But I think for me, it's also how that's extended into other areas of life, right? Because how can you do this work and be in this place where you are dedicating yourself to helping this particular population of people, and that not extend into helping everyone else, right?
Absolutely.
And I have caught myself saying, okay, wait a minute. You can't truly believe in this if you were seeing someone else who is not necessarily an immigrant, but who is in a difficult situation. You can't see that person and not help them in the same way that you would help someone in this situation, right? So seeing how that's extended has been, I think, my personal growth in this area. So,
so any other comments, any other remarks before we close out this episode?
No, just that again, we're incredibly blessed to have Bishop Seitz working with us, and truly an international voice on this issue. Yes. And really, for me, it's a privilege and a blessing every day to get to come here and get to do this work with the people that I work with every day, because it truly is a team like no other. And God has continued to put the right people in our path in terms of who we have the pleasure of working with, but also just the clients and their perseverance. I mean, they, have so much to give. I love going into big cities, especially New York, getting on the subway and just hearing all of the different languages. I can only do New York for a couple of days. It's a little too much, overstimulation for me, but the subway is always a fun ride because of all of the languages. I'm like, oh man, I don't know enough. I need to learn more. Right. So, just it's an incredible blessing to be here.
And I'll just say, back at you. I'm so grateful that you are here, and your commitment to this work and the expertise you've developed through the years has been amazing. And then the team that you have around you, Melissa, I'm very grateful.
Thank you.
To all of you for your work. I'm very proud when I travel to be able to say, we've got this organization here. You might be able to learn something from it.
Right.
And I will go back to, like, I think our fundraising team would be upset with me if I didn't mention it. You mentioned how the difficult financial situation that we're in, economic situation that many people find themselves in. But I feel like it's important to mention that really is an important part of continuing this work is the contributions, the financial contributions. And that's why we're so grateful for people that, my earring popped up, let's ignore that. I think that's what's so important for those of you who watch this podcast, who follow us on social media, who engage with us, who come into the office, who send in your donations, is that is really what keeps this operation going. And that's what we rely on to have been here these 40 years and to continue to serve this community is those contributions.
Right. It's like a cycle. Clients rely on Estrella, and we rely on our supporters too, and it goes back to the community. It's just a big circle. So I guess we can close this episode today.
Yes.
Thank you for tuning us with us on the first episode of 2026 of Amor al Migrante podcast. Congratulations, Estrella, on the 40th anniversary, right? So this year is going to be a whole 40th year anniversary and celebration. So tune in for more things that are going to happen that we're going to be sharing through social media, to emails. If you want to learn more about Estrella del Paso, follow us on social media, subscribe to our newsletter, and don't forget we have homework, Matthew 25, and then don't ever leave the fight. Keep fighting, and we'll see the light, and we'll go ahead and continue to keep changing lives, people's lives. So we'll see you guys on the next episode, and thank you so much for tuning on with us. Bye.
Que Dios les bendiga.
This is the Amor al Migrante podcast, Love for the Migrant, a project of Estrella del Paso, the largest provider of free immigration legal services in West Texas and Southern New Mexico. This podcast is coming to you from El Paso, Texas, hosted by Sandra Ramirez and Cristian Trujillo. Please subscribe to the Amor al Migrante podcast to be alerted about new episodes, and visit www.estrelladelpaso.org to support our work on the southern border.